All right. Now, we're going to start moving into what I call the four liberty documents. Our Constitution, our founding fathers, did not create something out of thin air. Okay, this is a piece that I believe is missing greatly in society. Understanding that our liberty, what's the difference between liberty? Yeah, what's the difference between liberty and freedom?
Morality.
That's right. Freedom plus morality gives you liberty. Our liberty that we have as Americans in this country, and I say that differently than to say those who live here, because non-citizens do not enjoy 100% the same constitutional rights that citizens do. The Supreme Court has ruled that multiple times, that in order to enjoy all of the rights and privileges that Americans have, you have to be a citizen. Which, when we get, if we, let's see, this is government, we will get into immigration discussion, and there's an issue there. And you'll see that play out in the news and in the media and public opinion. But there is a legal system that, in some ways, non-citizens do not get the same constitutional rights. They get almost all of them, don't get me wrong. It's not like a big, wide difference. But there are some things that is not afforded to non-citizens. I need to go and research it before I really speak to it. I know there is, and I don't remember right offhand what it is. Part of it is due process. There is a due process non-citizens get, but they don't get the full due process. So, and to be very clear, I need to do a little bit of research before I really go into that. I don't want to be misspoken on it. All right. There are 4 documents in English history that leads us to our Constitution. You're going to need to be able to list these 4 and the main provisions in each of these documents. What you should be looking for as we discuss this today, maybe into Monday, and we'll try to get it done today, is the connections to some of the rights and privileges we have today. You should also start making some connections with whatever knowledge you already have coming into this class on the Revolutionary War. You should see that, wait a minute, I've heard something about representation, taxation without representation, in the Revolutionary War. You will see that our founding fathers were not arguing a new right. They weren't being spoiled brats, but were reasserting their natural-born English rights and their ancient rights. In fact, 918 years old. And some people, I would typically do this, but I wanted to narrow it down because we don't have a full semester to teach this. Our first liberty document is actually the 10 Commandments. But I don't have time to go all the way back to the original, all the documents. And this, by the way, this 4 is not hard and fast. Other teachers, other professors might add 1 or 2 more, 3 or 4 more. Most certainly would add the 10 Commandments into it. But just understand, I'm not trying to skip the 10 Commandments or even the importance of it. It's greatly important, because actually Western civilization actually starts in Mesopotamia. The Judeo-Christian culture and theology starts Western Civ. So all of us, whether we like it or not, are part Jewish in heritage, we are Christian in heritage, we are Roman in heritage, and Greek in heritage. And then the last heritage piece would be Great Britain. So I don't have time to splice all of that. That'd take me a week to splice those different heritages together to explain what it means to be an American or even a member of Western Civ, which we all are. Even those of you who might have immigrated from Mexico, you are part of Western Civ. We are part of the same civilization. So either way, that's where we come from. So, but I do want you to understand these 4 liberty documents. All right, so let's jump over here to where our ideals of liberty comes from. Well, we've already talked a little bit about it. What I call the tap root, those of you who work the fields understand what a tap root is, I assume. The tap root of a plant is that center thick root that goes typically straight down into the ground. It's what anchors the plant into the ground. And then all the roots coming off of it are feeder roots. They're going out to get water, they're going out to get nutrients. But the tap root is a very important fact. A carrot is a tap root. The little hairs that come off a carrot, those are feeders. But a carrot itself is a tap root of that plant. Gives you a really strong idea what that looks like. Our heritage of liberty, I'm not going to say freedom because, again, freedom can be the absence of morality. The heritage of our liberty in this class, we're going to start back 918 years.
It can't be Greek. It's older than that.
Right. It's not Greek. What we get out of the Greeks is really the idea of democracy, that everybody gets to vote. Everybody who meets the qualification gets to vote. So British history. We got to start with understanding a little bit about British history. The British people is made up of Germanic tribes. Made up of three groups: the Anglos, the Saxons, and Jutes. You might have heard in your lifetime this phrase, Anglo-Saxons. You might have even heard of a phrase that is typically abbreviated as a WASP, White Anglo-Saxon Protestant. When you're dealing with groups of people, particularly in academia, they will characterize individuals, particularly somebody of European descent, non-Catholic, as a WASP. And so when you hear people discuss race issues, white privilege, they have replaced the ideal of the WASP with just all whites. It used to be WASP privilege, if you want to call it that way. Now it's all whites.
Let's see if I can remember. The Angles were there first, then the Saxons came, then the Jews from Denmark.
We're going to find it. I think these guys are first.
What?
Yep, Jutes came from, they don't last very long. But three different Germanic tribes show up. Here's kind of their patterns of migration. At one time, the Germanic tribes, now keep in mind, this now is the Norway, Sweden, those areas, Denmark, but that's not who was up there at the time. The Jutes came from the northern section of Scandinavia, and they actually sailed all the way down here to the south towards London. And then you got the Angles migrated into the middle section, the Saxons did, and then you got the Angles went north. Now, what's interesting is that you could go there today and they still have different dialects from this long ago. We're talking about 450 AD. They still have different dialects. We do have some intermixings between the Jutes and the Saxons, but for the most part, they stayed separate. Of course, they came across differently. By the time the Anglos and Saxons showed up, there wasn't a whole lot of Jutes left. And by the way, I'm probably not pronouncing Jutes correctly. Doesn't matter in this class. I'm sure it matters to Jutes, but if I ever run into one, which I don't think they exist anymore, they've been bred out, if you will. I guess I'll be corrected then, but just understand, three different Germanic groups. So if you put anything in notes, understand that the British Isles were originally settled by three Germanic tribes: the Anglos, the Saxons, and the Jutes.
And then before that it was the Romans, and then the people who were there are the Britons.
These are the Britons. These become the Brits.
Wait, so who were the people the Romans invaded before
at the same time period. Romans came, in fact, the Romans came, about 200, 300 AD, and were there for, 100 or 200 years. They left around 450 AD at the collapse of the empire. So they're dealing with not just the Anglos and the Saxons and the Jutes, but they're also dealing with those indigenous Druid type people that we don't really know anything about. There's no written record of them. Celts are further north, up towards what we'd call Ireland today. So, but there's no written record, so there's very little knowledge of them. There's only a lot of speculation. So that's the thing about history. History is only when there's written record. When there's no written record, it's called archaeology. As soon as you get written record, it switches. Now, you can have historical archaeology, where you take written record and do your digs to find out more. But when you're dealing with a civilization with no written record, it is not history. It is only archaeology. So that's why we don't know a whole lot, and I'm not going to talk a lot about them, because we don't have a lot of written record of the Jutes. We have a lot more of the Anglo-Saxons, because they established a very organized government system. In fact, that's where we get the shires. If you think about the Lord of the Rings, shires, those who are in charge of the shires are today called sheriffs. That's where we get the word sheriff. You have barons who were major landowners. They were like governors, or what we would call mayors, or like in Canyon County, we don't have one individual who oversees the county. We have the county commissioners. So a lot of that structure is being put into place and perfected under the Anglo-Saxons. But everything changes at 1066.